The oxygen molecule gets breathed in through either the nasal cavity or the oral cavity. For sake of argument, we're just going to say that this person's a mouth breather. So the oxygen molecule is going to come through the oral cavity, which is where the oxygen molecule will first enter the body. From the oral cavity, the oxygen molecule goes to the pharynx. After it's gone through the oral cavity, the oxygen molecule will go to the pharynx. The pharynx is kind of like a tube that connects the oral cavity to the next place the molecule will go. The larynx. The larynx is where all of our vocal cords are. It's kind of like the voice box that allows us to speak. From the larynx, the molecule then goes to the trachea. The trachea is a large tube that connects the larynx to the bronchial tubes in the lungs. It's kind of like a giant windpipe that sends air from the very top of your body in your mouth all the way down to the lungs. After the molecule goes down through the trachea, it'll then go to the bronchus. The bronchus, or bronchi if you're talking about two, is a large pipe that diverges the air from the fast-flowing windpipe, or the trachea, into the lungs. From the bronchi, or bronchus, it then goes to the bronchioles. These are the bronchioles. The bronchioles are the little offshoots from the bronchus, or the bronchi, which allow the oxygen molecules to get to all parts of the lungs to ensure a full inhale and exhale, so that the oxygen molecules can fill up the lungs in every part, not just one. From the bronchioles, the oxygen molecule goes to the alveoli. The alveoli are small, hollow pits filled with air, like a little air sac in the lungs, where the oxygen diffuses into our next destination, the capillaries. Our next destination, after the oxygen has traveled through the alveoli, is to diffuse into the capillaries. The capillaries are fine branching blood vessels, actually the smallest blood vessels in the body, only 1 cell thick, that collect the oxygen and send it from the bloodstream to other parts of the body. After we've gone through the capillaries, the oxygen then makes its way to the venules. The venules are kind of like connecting points. They're small blood vessels that come off of the capillaries and connect to the veins. So they pretty much connect the capillaries and the veins so that the blood can flow from the capillaries to the major veins in the bloodstream. So once again, it is gone from the bronchus to the bronchioles to the alveoli to the capillaries to the venules and then into the veins. From a vein that the molecule got to through the venule, the molecule will then go through the pulmonary valve. In the circulatory system, the pulmonary valve is a tube that brings blood in and out of the heart and prevents the backflow of the blood as it gets pumped, so it doesn't reflow into the heart after it's already gotten pumped. It does this because it's one way. From the pulmonary valve, the molecules then can go into the left atrium. The left atrium is one of the 4 chambers of the heart. It receives the oxygenated blood, hence the oxygen molecule. It then pumps the blood to the left ventricle. After the oxygen molecule has been in the left atrium, it goes through the bicuspid valve, or the mitral valve. The bicuspid, or mitral valve, brings the blood in and then swings it around to the other side, bringing the oxygenated blood from the left atrium into the left ventricle. This makes the lub in the lub-dub sound that the heart makes. For example, lub. That's what it looks like and sounds like. And that's our next destination, the left ventricle. The left ventricle is another one of the 4 chambers of the heart. It receives the oxygenated blood from the left atrium via the bicuspid valve and then pumps it into the aorta. From the left ventricle, the oxygenated blood then goes to the aorta. The aorta is the main artery of the body. It supplies oxygenated blood from the circulatory system to all the different parts and cells in the body. It brings the blood across from the left side of the heart, down the backbone, and to the rest of the body. After it's been through the aorta, it gets distributed throughout the whole body through arteries. So the arteries are tubes filled with blood that cover most of the body. So the oxygen molecule is going to come out from the aorta and the heart and go through all these different arteries and veins. And at this point, it's oxygenated. After the blood goes through the arteries, it gets distributed through the arterioles, which are like the branches coming from the main stem, the arteries. The arterioles are just small branches that come out from the arteries that lead into the designated capillaries for the molecule. So after the molecule has been through the arterioles, the next destination is capillaries. The capillaries are very small little branches that distribute the oxygen to the parts of the body that need it. After going through the capillaries, the oxygen molecule will then be sent by the capillaries to a cell in the bloodstream, or around the body. The oxygen molecule contains the oxygen which is needed to make ATP. ATP is needed to make the carbon dioxide. This is how the process is going to go. Water plus glucose plus oxygen equals ATP. For lack of drawing skills, this is going to be our ATP. We're not done yet. We still need to get carbon dioxide. When ATP goes into the mitochondria produces carbon dioxide. CO2. So, ATP plus mitochondria equals carbon dioxide. So, when the carbon dioxide molecule, which is not the oxygen molecule anymore, it's a carbon dioxide molecule because it got deoxygenated in the cell, comes back around, it goes through the venule, which takes it to the veins. So after the carbon dioxide goes through the veins and it comes back up to the heart, So once again, it's gone from the aorta to the arteries, to the arterioles, to the capillaries, to the cell, to the venule, to the veins. After the blood has gone through the veins and it's deoxygenated, it comes in back into the heart through either the superior or inferior vena cava, depending on if it's in the upper or lower half of the body. It comes in through the inferior if it's coming from the lower, and superior if it's coming from the higher. From the pulmonary vein, the carbon dioxide travels to the right atrium. The tricuspid valve brings blood in and swings it around to the other side, bringing the blood, unoxygenated, from the right atrium into the right ventricle, our next destination. After getting swung around by the tricuspid valve, the carbon dioxide and dropped blood goes into the right ventricle. The right ventricle is one of the 4 chambers in the heart. It receives unoxygenated blood from the right atrium via the tricuspid valve. From the right ventricle, the unoxygenated blood goes to the pulmonary valve. The pulmonary valve is a tube that brings the blood in and out of the heart. It is a one-way valve. So after it goes out the pulmonary artery and then back to the lungs, and then it gets exhaled out. Then it goes to the pulmonary artery, then to the artery, then to the arterioles, then to the capillaries, which is in here, then to the alveoli, which is in here, then to the bronchioles, then the bronchus, then to the trachea, then the larynx and the pharynx, and then out the oral or the nasal cavity.